Emergency pod. Before we hop into this emergency podcast, got to tell you guys about Strava Craft Coffee. Strava Craft Coffee, of course, that delicious, smooth CBD coffee. And it combines two great things, delicious coffee and that CBD benefit that you get, which helps with aches, pains, migraines, anything that's going on, including the coffee jitters. It helps relieve. So it's really the perfect 1-2 punch for you. Make sure to check out Strava Craft Coffee, delicious coffee. And if you do, use the code DNVR20 for 20% off your entire purchase. And if you've already used the magical code DNVR20, well, subscribe to Strava Craft Coffee, where you'll save 20% on every order. And you have the option of getting your coffee every 2, 3, 4, 6, or 8 weeks delivered straight to you. You don't have to order it. You don't have to enter your credit card information. It just shows up at that 20% off. So make sure to check out Strava Craft Coffee and make sure to check it out at the DNVR bar where we've got it on tap. It is a favorite in the DNVR bar. So make sure to check out Strava Craft Coffee. All right, Dre, let's hop into the show.
Broncos country is sitting in the south stands, drinking the Coors from Mile High, the best part of the weekend. Hugging a perfect stranger as they become a friend, having a good time when the orange and blue WIN. Tuning in every day with the good folks down at DNVR.
Welcome into this emergency podcast to talk about the big move the Broncos made by releasing Todd Davis. I'm your host, Zach Stevens, joined by my man, the Professor, Dre, the Math Magician. I love it. And before we hop into the show, guys, got to tell you about our presenting sponsor, MSU Denver Online. MSU Denver Online puts a dynamic education at your fingertips without forcing you to decide between earning a degree and living your life. As the whole world goes remote right now, MSU Denver has already mastered it, and they have mastered the art of online learning. So make sure to check out everything they have to offer at msudenver.edu/online to see all of the programs they have, including over 40 online and hybrid programs and 750 classes. So make sure to check them out, msudenver.edu/online. My boy, Dre, thanks for hopping on with me to talk about this news in between the Avs intermission. I mean, one thing the Broncos are great at, as we know, is always staying relevant. Now, I would think in Avs Game 7 would take some precedence over this, but this was big enough news to do an emergency pod. So thanks for jumping on with me. And Dre, when you first saw that, what did you think?
I couldn't believe it. I was really, really shocked. Obviously, had this happened like 2 years ago, no shock whatsoever. Like, had this happened in the first offseason where Vic Fangio and his staff were hired, you almost would have expected something like this to some extent.
Right.
But the history we've had at linebacker since Vic Fangio's been on this team, not signing high-end free agents, not drafting anyone high, passing up on guys like Devin Bush, passing up on really any first 2-day picks, settling for guys more like Josie Jewell, Justin Sternot. Then with the injuries that had occurred to the linebacking core in recent days, I was completely blindsided by this. Didn't see it coming one bit.
Yeah. And it was very shocking because, Dre, just a week ago, the Broncos lost Justin Sternot for the season, and that immediately meant linebacker depth. The Broncos need to go out and sign someone. So, of course, they've had the week of the linebackers this week. Yeah. You go out and you get Mark Barron. That's why I'm repping the Alabama polo, bringing in another Alabama player. And then today you make a trade for a backup linebacker, and now you're thinking, okay, the depth is good. Let's go cut our most experienced linebacker. It is shocking because do the Broncos need depth at cornerback? No. Do the Broncos need depth at defensive line? No. Do the Broncos need depth at safety? Maybe, but you're very comfortable with the starting two that they have. Right. Linebacker was the one where, Dre, it wouldn't have been a surprise if they added someone off waivers, kind of like a Mark Barron type of guy. Instead, Todd is out the door, and I'm surprised by the move, because just in yesterday's pod we were talking about how Todd was making positive steps back on the field. But 2 weeks ago, at the beginning of camp, when Todd Davis got hurt, I thought, could this be a move? Because it would save $5 million, $4.5 million against the cap. And obviously, when he was cut, you can't move on from him because of the injury. So you had to wait for him to get healthy. But I thought, man, to save that money, if you're not going to have a healthy Todd Davis, could make sense. But now, a week before the season, I do have to say I'm very shocked by it, especially with the timing.
I mean, it feels like a really loud endorsement of guys like Josie Jewell, who were kind of forgotten at this point. But if you're looking for a Todd Davis replacement, a quarterback to that defense, at least on your first two downs, Jewell seems to be the logical response here. And that speaks really loudly for the Iowa talent. Yes,
it does. And Dre, this is a guy that 10 days ago, let me pull up the quote right here because I have it. 10 days ago when we talked to him, he said, "I'm just trying to work hard every day and hopefully become, within the next year, whatever it is, a starter again. That's my main goal. I want to start on defense." Well, 10 days later, Josie, you're the starter. And Dre, I think that's exactly how it's going to break down. I think Josie Jewell is going to end up being the starter on first and second down. And then third down, you bring in Mark Barron. Justin Hollins, you have him as well. Maybe it's a sign that he's developing well, although they just moved him inside this year a week ago. Yeah. So it's not like that. That's you're counting on him to be a big role, but it's going to be linebacker by committee. And last year at the beginning of the season, it seemed like it was linebacker by committee next to Todd Davis. You know, you had Todd Davis being the dude, and then linebacker by committee. Obviously, Alexander Johnson takes that and runs away with it. So much so that the Broncos said, "Alexander, you're now our linebacker who's going to be a 3-down player. And now we're going to go by committee with everyone else."
Yeah. I mean, you could do worse approaches. And I guess the other crazy thing is this is a team, I know they were primarily a nickel last year most of the time, but in that nickel, they had 2 inside linebackers. Like Todd Davis was on the field just about 100% of the snaps when he was healthy, and he was calling the plays. So it just seems like a massive change. But obviously, with him being injured, they've been able to practice with the ones without him, and they must have felt really comfortable. Has Mark Barron even practiced with the team yet?
He has a couple practices, and each day it's gotten a little more reps for him.
I mean, this also feels like quite the ringing endorsement for him.
Yeah. This is a ringing endorsement for 3 guys. For Josie Jewell, that he can be the guy, the run stopper that you need. For Mark Barron, because Dre, like you said, I believe his first practice was Tuesday with the team. They have not practiced today because they're practicing tonight. So that's 3 practices. And this is a guy who had to learn the defense first. So big endorsement to him. And then, of course, I don't think they're making this move with Todd Davis if they don't think that Alexander Johnson is going to at least be the player that he was last year, at least, if not a step up, because I know there's some people that are still in wait and see mode with Johnson. And I get that, even though he was a beast last year, but there's still some people in wait and see mode. The Broncos are not in wait and see mode. They think that he is the truth. They think he's probably a Pro Bowl caliber player in order to move on from Todd.
Yeah, I think you're right. And yet the play that stands out most to me in the Todd Davis, Alexander Johnson partnership there in the middle is a play that you pointed out to me when we were just talking at the office off air midway through last season. It's a red zone play. I forget who the opponent was. There's a man in motion. You can see Alexander Johnson's kind of lost. And I think it's Todd Davis. Maybe it's even Justin Simmons kind of tapping him and saying, "Hey, this is your assignment," putting him in the right spot right before the snap. Right before the ball is snapped, Alexander Johnson makes a key play to prevent a touchdown, but he's not in the right spot. If not for a teammate like Todd Davis or Justin Simmons, puts him in that right spot. So you're expecting that growth, that IQ, that pre-snap read to really make a big jump because we've seen the skills. Great run thumper, very physical. moving sideline to sideline, he was far from limited as his maybe physical profile would suggest. Wasn't necessarily a huge liability in coverage. And on passing downs, he's a massive asset as a blitzer up the middle. He can really dominate the A gap because he is so powerful and ferocious coming downhill and attacking guards. So he has a lot of utility, but it just felt all along Todd Davis was the perfect yin to his yang. And now it's all on his shoulders. And Alexander Johnson, I expect him to flourish, but this is a big moment for him.
Yeah, it really is a big moment. And Dre, that's a great point. And it reminds me of something that Vic Fangio said just about a week ago when asked about Alexander Johnson calling the plays and taking that from Todd Davis because Todd Davis has been hurt.
Right.
Vic said, I'm not 100% comfortable with that. So that is even more so of kind of mind-blowing. And that, Dre, that may be the biggest surprise and the biggest part of this move is you just lost the quarterback of your defense. You just lost the signal caller, not because he went down for a season-ending injury, not because you traded him for a first-round pick, because you released him. You chose to do that for $4.5 million in savings. And to me, I'm just wondering has Vic Fangio changed his mind in the past week? Because he said he wasn't 100% comfortable with Alexander Johnson calling the plays and taking on that responsibility because of what we saw last year. And your great example that you pointed out, has he changed that? Or does he just think that there is not much of a fall off between Todd Davis and then Josie Jewell, Mark Barron by committee? Because I do know he's comfortable with Josie Jewell in there calling plays. So Vic must just say, for $4.5 million, I can take that money and I can go spend, and I can, with the linebackers we have, I can make up for that.
Right. Yeah. In that week, some more certainty must have been instilled in Vic to have a little more confidence and at least someone to call these plays on defense, really, because that for a veteran defensive head coach to get rid of his play caller, a week's time before the season starts, that kind of shocked me. But yeah, I think you're right. You're counting on Josie Jewell to be that reliable IQ, to be that quarterback. The other question that stems from this, okay, you've got the cap savings. Now what? Right. What do you do with these cap savings? Yeah.
Right, exactly. And now the Broncos have $30 million in cap savings, which is top 5 in the league. Are they going to go? I know a lot of people out here are asking the question, Jadeveon Clowney? Is he in the cards? Right. And a lot of people would then really like the move of getting rid of Todd Davis if that's the thing.
Oh, yeah.
But Dre, you don't need that $4.5 million to go sign Jadeveon. You already had $26 million in cap space. So if this was a move to get Jadeveon, I'm telling you, it's not. It's not a move to get Jadeveon. Some people have said Miles Jack. Now that one makes more sense because you don't need that $4.5 million to get Miles Jack. You already have $25 million in cap space to go get him if you want and if he's available. But you just obviously wouldn't have a spot for Todd Davis on the roster if that's the case. So that makes more sense to me than Clowney. But also, Dre, you already made 2 moves at linebacker. So we have some people in the comment section asking what inside linebackers are available on the market right now. I don't think you're making this move to then go make another move at linebacker. I think this was just we would rather take the $4.5 million and have Josie by committee because the Broncos have already made multiple moves at linebacker this week. We talked about Mark Barron. Then earlier today, they traded Christian Covington, a backup defensive lineman who did not look like he was going to make the roster, for a backup veteran linebacker, Austin Calitro, from the Bengals. This is a guy who is a solid backup at linebacker. You don't want to ask much more from him, and a really good special teams guy.
Yes.
So I just don't see them making all these moves then just to make another one at linebacker.
No, exactly. I mean, if anything, as you mentioned, they had the cap to make that move prior. Then once they get their guy, they could let him go. They've already added 2 guys. I don't think they were waiting to make a third move to get rid of Todd Davis. In fact, We don't just know. Like, the evidence is clear in front of us that there's no logical path there. A Clowney would be nice if Chubb isn't 100%. But again, this would be completely unrelated. Yeah, it's I mean, it just goes to show you the confidence they have in the committee and maybe the lack of confidence or the lack of need they felt for Todd Davis on the field. And maybe he's one of those guys. I always talk about there is something about, athletes, super duper athletes, when they lose a half step, all of a sudden it kind of brings them back to being on an equal playing field with these other elite athletes that play in these top pro leagues. Well, when you're a below average athlete and you lose that half step, sometimes there's no recouping that, man. And maybe this injury was enough for them to be like, he was already limited athletically. This is going to sap him enough to where there's not much to do with him.
That's a really good point. And last year he had a calf injury, which kept him out all of training camp and preseason. Right. This year he gets a calf injury on the other calf. And so maybe it was that, Dre. Maybe it was saying, okay, the injuries are just piling up. We could save $4.5 million by making this move 10 days before the season. Is that better than doing it, 1 week into the season, having to put him on IR because another injury pops up, then we don't get to save the money. It's surprising. And Dre, I have to ask you, because we've had so many comments about Jadeveon on a just totally different note. Should the Broncos, with their $30 million in cap space, make a play for Jadeveon Clowney?
Only on a nice, cheap, prove it 1 year deal.
And so what are we talking about?
One year for like 6.5.
Okay.
I mean, again, it's 1 year, right? So you say, hey, we've got this defense. Chubb isn't 100%. We're going to rotate you. We're going to do some NASCAR fronts. You may even play hand in the dirt sometimes with Vaughn behind you. You're going to get some production and a fun defense. We're going to make this defense real good. And this will allow you to go get your real money next year. Probably not with us, but this gives you that chance. That'd be the pitch. I wouldn't get my hopes up. I think they're counting on Jeremiah Tachu a lot as well. Yeah,
and people who are pounding the table for Clowney are probably saying, Jeremiah, who?
right. Yeah, exactly.
But I agree with you, Dre, man. Yeah, if you can bring Clowney in, heck, I would go up to 1 million or 1 year, $15 million. Wow. I don't even think that's going to get it done, Dre. So I think the one year, $6 million would be fantastic. I don't think it's going to happen because of now so much interest from some high profile teams who I think are going to have a lot of money for him. So unfortunately, this is not a move for Jadeveon Clowney. This is not a move. I don't think it's a move from Myles Jack, although that makes a little bit more sense. How big of a move is this, Dre? 10 days before the season. How much better or worse is the Broncos defense?
Well, I think it's a bit of a wash right now. I think that just looking at them on paper as someone who rewatches every game a couple times and charts all the games and grades every player. So I'm pretty familiar with Todd Davis and Josu Jewell and all they've done in a Broncos jersey. I think it's mostly a wash as far as on-field play. What it decreases is the IQ of that defense. I know people were very critical of Todd Davis and his inability in coverage, but often Todd Davis was in the right spot. He'd always get killed for his performances against the Chiefs. Look, he was doing what the game plan indicated, which was we don't want to get burned on big plays to Hardman and Tyreek Hill, so we'll live with that 10 to 15-yard gain from Travis Kelce. Just don't allow that to be a big play. And he would do that. He was in the right spot. He was making his tackles. He wouldn't miss many tackles. So now I think you're gambling a bit on upside. You're hoping that the ceiling of guys like maybe Joseph Jones can be one of the committee members in coverage. You're really counting on Mark Barron to have a bit of an impact in sub packages. We'll see. There could be a formula here, but we're entering the unknown, which is always a little scary for me.
Man, and here's what people can feel good about is if there's anyone to trust when it comes to linebackers, it's got to be Vic Fangio, right?
Yes,
I mean, for the past 30 years in the NFL, if there's anyone that you're going to say, take over my linebacking core, you get to make all the decisions, it's got to be Vic. Vic,
Absolutely.
the Broncos don't make this move to only save $4.5 million. If Vic Fangio isn't probably just signing off, he's probably saying, John, how much do you want $4.5 million?
Right.
Of course, the general manager is going to say, of course I want $4.5 million. Right. And then Vic probably said, let's move on from Todd. And that's really good to know that there's not much of a drop off between Todd and Josie. And maybe also to relieve some concern about the quarterback of the defense, maybe you're going to see that from the safeties a lot more. Now, maybe not calling the plays, but the brains.
Yes. Yeah, you're really counting on Kareem Jackson. Justin Simmons' IQ is unquestioned. I think just his vision of the field would be key. Maybe that would be the route I'd go with quarterback of the defense. Yeah, you make a great point. There'd be no one else we would entrust the linebacker unit to than Vic Fangio. And what Vic has told us in the last 2 years, what he's told film nerds like myself is, guys, don't fret too much. Like, this position isn't super important. We'll figure it out. We'll find a street free agent like Alexander Johnson, make him work. And, I can find a quarterback to my D with one of these 5th rounders we've got, and I'll figure it out. Don't you worry.
Right, exactly. And I think that's a fantastic point about Alexander Johnson. He's playing like a first-round pick, Dre. He wasn't a first-round pick, and obviously he had a very complicated background in history and is a big-time talent. But the Broncos got him, and before Vic was here, he didn't have a role with this team. He was just a talented guy that they had. Vic comes in, and I think Alexander Johnson even surprised Vic. So maybe there's that other gem that's there. And this was Todd Davis's last year on the contract. So clearly the Broncos weren't planning on him being a long-term option. So you lose him for this year. And what will have to happen for us to look back and say that was a bad decision by the Broncos? They shouldn't have saved $4.5 million, because I'm thinking of playing Kansas City. And let's say Josie Jewell gets burned by Travis Kelce. Are we really looking back and saying, if only we had Todd Davis, if only the Broncos had Todd Davis? Probably not. Yeah. Is it if Josie Jewell gets steamrolled over and over and over? Maybe that's when we're looking back and saying that. I just don't expect Josie Jewell to be getting, plowed over.
Yeah, that's his MO. Maybe he's not super spectacular. Maybe he's not like crashing to his spots, but he's a guy who's reliable. He won't miss many tackles. He'll be in his spots. He won't be out of position. So yeah, I think that's where the trust comes, that they can trust Josie Jewell to at least be in the right spots like 95% of the time, and they feel confident enough that'll happen even at game speed as he gets significantly more reps than he would have otherwise.
Yeah, and because now maybe it comes back to saying that this is a bad move if the defense just looks lost, especially week 1, week 2, week 3. But that's going to be on Vic, because he should be empowering the guys that he trusts, which is Kareem, which is Justin Simmons. Don't put everything on Josie Jewell's plate. If you're not comfortable, 100% comfortable with Alexander Johnson taking this defense, then don't put it on his plate. Right. Give it to the safety. Split it up between these guys. And I don't think that should be very difficult to do, because you have 2 very experienced, very smart guys in that safety group. So don't put it all on Josie. Don't put it all on Alexander Johnson. And it is tough moving on from a guy that's been with your team for 6 years, has started 60 games for you.
Crazy.
But in the end, it's the question I asked you, Dre. How much drop-off is there?
Yep.
Probably shouldn't be too much.
Yeah, no, it probably shouldn't be too much. And with Todd Davis starting 90% of your snaps, you kind of knew like that position was capped out, right? There was no improving from here. In fact, with Todd Davis and the injuries, at most you were maybe hoping he could replicate what he was doing last year, which was like borderline decent starter level. So yeah, now this gives you a little more opportunity, and I think they'll get more creative with these sub packages. I think they'll, I'll be interested. I've always been big on Joseph Jones. I'd love to see him get a little more playing time. I'd love to see Justin Watson and see what two more physical inside linebackers could do. And I'd love to see Justin Hollins tried out a little more and see how that length and range can really play up in coverage. So if anything else, this opens up opportunities for other guys, and you can see if maybe that position can reach a higher ceiling than where it was.
Exactly. Well, Dre, I really appreciate you jumping on with me to get this emergency pod in. The next 24 hours are going to be busy as the cut deadline is 2 p.m. Mountain Time tomorrow. So literally 23 hours away from the Broncos going from 78 players down to 53. 25 cuts still need to be made. We'll see if there's any bigger moves, which maybe even another emergency pod. But we'll be right back with you on the Broncos podcast tomorrow after those moves, after we talk to John Elway and Vic Fangio to find out just what's going on. So make sure to stay tuned to thednvr.com. That'll do it for the live portion of this podcast. Thank you guys so much for jumping on. And I'm going to jump into the comments section to talk to you people on this fine Friday.